Good morning and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Katie Schulman, Assistant Objects Conservator in Conservation and Science. So while many people associate Caillebotte with paintings, this exhibition also featured several three-dimensional objects, specifically hats. In my role as an objects conservator, I supported the care and presentation of these pieces through casework design, condition assessments, and installation processes. It was a true privilege to play a part in this exceptional exhibition and to help bring to life the many hats of Caillebotte's painted subjects. So welcome to the museum and to today's program, Gustave Caillebotte, Painting His World. This landmark exhibition reintroduces Gustave Caillebotte as a singular voice within Impressionism, an artist who turned his gaze inward, capturing the intimate world of his family, friends, and everyday encounters. It is now my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Gloria Groom, for an exclusive look into Gustave Caillebotte, Painting His World. As the chair and Winton Green Curator of Painting and Sculpture of Europe and the Executive Director of Initiatives in France for the Art Institute, Gloria Groom has been involved in numerous major monographic exhibitions and their accompanying catalogs, including Gauguin, Odilon-Redon, Caillebotte, Renoir, Manet, Seurat, and Toulouse-Lautrec. We are grateful to recognize the John D. and Alexandra C. Nichols Family Foundation for their lead support of Gustave Caillebotte Painting His World, and Raymond James is the lead corporate sponsor. We thank them for their generous support. And now, please join me in welcoming Gloria to the stage.
Thank you very much. I feel weird up here because I need to be talking to somebody, as I have for the last 3 lectures, and I was supposed to be talking to Megan True, who abandoned me and went to the Courtauld Institute to continue her graduate studies. So here you are, and I'm not used to not sitting, but here we go. So we've been extremely happy with the Caillebotte. It's not Van Gogh, but it's been getting lots of people, and we've had amazing, just street advertisements, and I love that we had project windows, which allowed all of the Michigan Avenue and even as far south as Beverly to put window decorations inspired by the exhibition. And of course, we were delighted when our painting, Paris Street Rainy Day, which has been out of the gallery since August of 2024, returned, and it was really a processional. It was like a medieval processional. We were all like, oh my gosh, here it comes. It's coming back. So it's in the building. And then by probably the 3rd week in October, it will be back on its favorite wall in 201. So I must confess, I usually do this lecture after every exhibition. What have I learned? And this time I have to say, what is still needed to learn? I have not cracked the nut of Caillebotte. There's just not been enough written about him forever and ever as we have for Monet and Degas. And it's exciting. So what I'm going to share with you today are things I've learned, but also what still lingers as driving me crazy mysteries that somebody else will have to take on in the future. It won't be me. So Caillebotte's world. So we know we've done a lot of research. We've had access to family archives. We've looked at military records. We've looked at criminal records. We've looked at civil records. We have a lot of information. And we know just visually when you walk into the exhibition, you're aware that this is a different artist than the Impressionist you grew up with, and that this is an artist who felt very comfortable with his family and painted his family first and foremost in their home. And so you have the very first painting you walk into is the one from the Getty, his brother at the window, and then next to him is the brother, the surviving brother, who will carry on the inventory, as you will, or even the legacy and the reputation of his brother, because he is the one who has progeny, and he is the reason the descendants are happily lending to probably 45% of the exhibition. So here you see Martial, windows closed, really studiously concentrating on his piano playing because he's going to enroll in the conservatory, and he's going to become a quite well-known composer. And here he is after he's married to a very bourgeois, Marie Mineret, And he's moved to the Rue Scribe, and he's no longer living with his brother. And you can see that it's Caillebotte's paintings which are decorating his home, in this sense, the mother that you saw in the first slide. And as I said, we had access to albums, so we know his father was a big deal. He's wearing the Légion d'honneur, the medal for that, but he also died early. He died in 1874, so while Caillebotte was working on the floor scrapers, while he was starting to be a really serious artist. We do know his mother dies 4 years later, and there's the brother that is a half-brother from the very first marriage. Caillebotte is the product of the third marriage, who becomes a priest, and he shows up at the end of the story, but because, as you'll remember, Caillebotte has a different kind of marital life, meaning he doesn't marry, but he lives with someone. The priest is really not part of his life. Here's Caillebotte in school. He goes to a very prestigious boys' school. He's with his brothers. And one of the things that distinguishes Caillebotte from his brothers is he has a stronger jawline, and whenever you see him, he's rarely smiling. I think there's only one image where he's grinning, which is about as far as he gets. And of course, there's the famous photo, which we weren't allowed to have in our exhibition because the author of the book, Gustave Caillebotte, Painting is a Serious Game, wanted it to be in his book. And so he held it hostage until his book was published. And then Amaury, the author of the book, allowed us to use it in the film strip, you know, the video, the 6.5-minute video, which I hope you'll all either see in the exhibition or you can get it on your, while you're looking at our website. But there he is in 1868, dressed for a costume ball. What do we make of it? I don't know. It's really interesting. But I think the point is that he's very serious. He's serious about his art. He's serious about the working artist. He's serious about dressing up. And he's seriously dressing up fashionably for a young woman in 1868. And with the hair, with the wig, with everything. The one thing he can't disguise is that jawline. But it's still pretty effective. We also know, and these are things we learned doing our research, so we've learned a lot about the family, we've learned a lot about his friends, we've learned the identities of these people he painted. We've done a lot of research to get to where we are, and we know that for the last 13 years of his life, he had a female companion whose name was Anne Hagen, who changes her name to Charlotte Berthier, which made us think she might be an actress, but we still don't know. And we know that when Martial, his brother, marries Marie Mineret, she refuses to have Charlotte anywhere near, not in the house, not anywhere. And so Martial has to go to visit Gustave in the suburbs across the Seine from Argenteuil, where he was living in the last 5 years of his life. And we know from this painting of Charlotte that she's very much a part of his life. She's there when he dies. She's tending to the roses in this painting. But we also know the family literally canceled, as we know from this photograph where you see elements of Charlotte in the, you see her hat, you see her weird-looking dog. We'll talk more about that dog later because that is one of my mysteries. And so she's kind of there. And then you see in this other photograph where you have the elements, but you also see the flounce of her dress here. And you see how badly they have tried to Photoshop 19th century style her out of the painting, of the photograph. So canceling with a capital C. So that's the archival. That's what we know from all of the research that the three curators and our helpers have done as we scoured as far as we could get in time, because also we're negotiating loans, we're trying to get the authors to write for the catalog. So there's, you do research at the same time, but it's kind of ongoing. What the paintings tell us is something different. And for those of you who have come multiple times, I'm sure you'll agree, every time I go into the exhibition space, I see something I didn't see before. Caillebotte is a uniquely sensitive and bold and interesting and singular artist who continues to surprise us. So we know the house in Paris, and then we have the house at Hyères that were simultaneous, and he was going from city to country every year, starting when he was 18 until he was around 22. But this painting from Hyères has always been an interesting one because people think, well, it's not finished. But you don't paint a painting starting from the right-hand side and going to the left-hand side. That's just not the way art works. So we know that there was a person, you can barely see it, there, somewhere there. So what is going on? Is it his brother, as some people have posited, the brother who dies at 26, who you saw at the window in the Getty painting? Or is it someone he really can't stand? And he just decided they're gone, and now I'm stopping. Don't know, because we also don't know who this is. It's just a silhouette. Some of it's conditioned because it comes from the family and it probably could use a good clean, but it's something very interesting that intrigues us, and that's why I wanted it in the exhibition. One, because it's one of the few paintings at Hyères inside, you know, the boating paintings, but this is one of the few that shows this home that they lived in every summer for a number of years, but also because he just leaves it. So finish, unfinished, this is something I also think you'll notice during the exhibition. It's really interesting how finish is really finished. Unfinished is where you can see he starts in the center. Jules Froyer's face is very well described, but then he just lets that interior architecture speak for itself. It's kind of like, okay, you get the idea. Your eyes will fill it in. You've seen all these other paintings that are finished. You know the boiserie, you know the gold, the gilt framing. And the same with the man on the balcony. We have it next to a very finished painting. So your eyes fill in where the sketchiness leaves you. And at this point in his career, he is just drawing onto the canvas. As you see in the beginning, we have the drawings for some of his major paintings, very observed. You can tell he's really working, scaling them up into the final composition. But towards the end, it's a looser, it's like, I'm going to go for it. Much more impressionist than he is most of the time. And then, as we talk about in the exhibition, these two paintings were done before he even starts his official art career, before he signs on with Léon Bonnat and becomes a member of the Beaux-Arts. But they're very impressionist, and they show that he had a real knack for observation early on. He also has a real knack for color and patterns. And we know that in 1870, before Gustave enlists to defend the city of Paris against the Prussians, the infantry, the French infantry, the Garde Mobile, came and bivouacked at this country home, which was 40 minutes outside of Paris. And young Caillebotte was very interested and just has fun things to do. We know that everyone knows this guy's defecating, and this guy's shooting off into the, and this guy's just taking a nap. And it's just, at ease for a military group, and maybe one of the reasons they lost. But I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry. There's no shame if there's any French people in here. So you see these, just he's having fun with this guy, just little legs dangling from the balcony of his family home. And he continues, some of these figures just continue, and it's almost a game to play when you're going through the exhibition. He is in kind of the ROTC of the French military. He has to do military exercises. And he does this full-fledged painting of an infantryman, hand in pocket, smoking a cigarette, really at ease. Somebody he probably met during his, when he had to go back and do military exercises. But he also has a nod to his time in the military and to the French military in paintings like the Place Saint-Augustin, where you can't this is actually wearing red pants, but when you blow up something that's really, really small, it doesn't really show up. You can see it better in this, where you see the military man walking across the street. And in the sketch, it's just that. Again, he's just indicating that they're going to be red pant legs there for that infantryman, and you're just going to fill it in because I know it's there, and I'm going forward and making the final composition of the Pont de l'Europe. And then you see it again in paintings like René at the window, his brother who dies at 26, who we know had lots of debts and never really launched and never had that same work ethic that the other Caillebotte brothers have. And you see him, and Caillebotte shows him standing up from having sat right by the window where he's been observing. And you can read into it, maybe he got up because he sees a young woman walking down the street alone. Don't know. I mean, these are readable paintings. They set up narratives. And he does it again and again with just certain figures that reappear, such as in the Peintre de Bâtiment. They're not really building painters. They're actually doing the facade, the trim. But he shows the lone woman behind the man that's inspecting his work. So you see a man in a top hat, and then you see two men in top hats, and then the woman just kind of walking by herself. And as we know, a woman walking by herself, unless she was just going from point A to point B across the street, was already something that proper women wouldn't do. You need an escort. Berthe Morisot couldn't go to visit her very good friend Edouard Manet without her mother with her. I mean, these are just the rules of decorum, the rules of the game in the 19th century. So anytime you see something like that, it makes you, oh, okay, this is interesting. What does it mean? And I just love the fact that you have these really carefully observed drawings. And so this man at the ladder in the drawing on the right, and then he's made that man at the ladder, but then he's made another man in front of him bending over so that you can't see most of the man that's standing up at the ladder, but he's there. Caillebotte knows he's there, but he's just, making a composition that he wants from this very, very detailed, how does the weight of the hands on the ladder, how does that work? He's getting it right. And as you'll remember, this is the wine shop directly down from where the brother is looking out on the Rue de Lisbonne. So it was something he could observe from the sidewalk, from the windows. He could ask them to stop for a second, give me a little pose. These were his world. Again, very insular, very, I don't want to say controlled, but a lot of these people either worked for him or were in his friendship or familial group. And again, you see just little glimpses of what he likes, certain types of people. He likes workers. He likes the lone woman crossing the street, but he also likes the painter with the ladder, which you see in our painting, for example. These are just things that I just, when you get an exhibition together, you almost wish you could write the catalog after you put it all up. Because after you put it together and you see how certain paintings talk to each other or how there's repetition across paintings, then you start to think differently about what you may have written or may have thought before. And that's always a good thing. And that happens with every exhibition. With Caillebotte, however, it's even more, more dramatic, because there are so many blanks to fill in. I mean, we literally have the correspondence, and we have very little history, and we have the paintings. So we're only given the information about his social life, about his family life from the paintings that he expresses himself in. So that's a very low level. It's an exciting level, and we have an exhibition because of that level, but it still gives leaves a lot of empty spaces for the future. Again, these repetitions of figure, the man with his kind of worn work jacket walking down the street. We have the drawing. And then you see at the end of his life, he's painting the gardener walking down a lone road with the same kind of pose, the same sort of profile, as just kind of referring back to paintings and people that he saw earlier in life that repeat themselves in a pose. We know in the Pont de l'Europe, this was the architectural feat of its time. This was the engineering feat. This was 10 or 12 years before Gustave Eiffel's tower. And you remember this was an X-shaped bridge, which he's showing us, which unfortunately was torn down in 1931, so we don't have it, but you can see parts of this big spreading out bridge over the Gare Saint-Lazare, which is what everyone is looking at. And it's an amazing painting with lots of detail, even though it seems pretty straightforward. Okay, there's a couple, but are they a couple? He's kind of in front of her. Is he turning back? Is he looking at the man? What's going on? We know that it is Gustave, that it is his self-portrait, that he's wearing the mourning band for his brother who is recently deceased. We know that she is not in mourning because she has red bows on her white suede shoes, and she's a little too ruffled for a morning dress, and also has a parasol that's quite exotic. But they're just little details, like this little derby man behind him. There's that infantry man. When you start looking and trying to figure it out. And I love the fact that this dog, which has caused a lot of art historians, like, is he sexualized? And I don't know. I mean, he's happy. His ears aren't up, but he's not all, ruffled. He's just trotting. And what's so fun about it is that Gustave leaves that little space, so 1 foot is up. He's just really careful to catch that little shadow. And I have to say, I went through the exhibition with 4 artists, and it was the most amazing thing. Two teach at the School of the Art Institute, 2 are very well-known artists, and we just spent 3 hours just looking at little details like that and how he's constructing a painting and what does it mean. And I learned so much from them, and I was able to give them a little biography, but it doesn't matter because the paintings do speak for themselves. Whether or not how you interpret it is one thing. And then there's this painting, which this confounds me. How he can go from those claustrophobic interiors of his family to this painting the next year, which is so open and so masterful and so not impressionist, but impressionist-like. Just how he must be such a talent that he could imbibe. Right now, he started to collect Monet and Renoir. He started his collection even before meeting them. He starts buying their work because he thinks of them as the new thing. But his work, he knows his work is very different. And now he shows this. He shows it not until 1979, but it's really, there's weird stuff. Like, what is that? I've asked the curator in Paris, and he's like, I don't know. I mean, is it a tower? Is it an ivory-covered tower? Don't know. I've been to this site. I've looked at this river that runs right by his property in Hyères. It is on his property. Still don't know. But look how he's done the reflections. It's kind of like Monet came by and said, "Excuse me, let me help. You need some help here," because it's, as we know, Manet did with Berthe Morisot, much to her dismay. Let me touch that up. But it's truly masterful. And then also, as we talked about, if anyone who came to the lecture last week, where is the viewer? Where is the artist and where is the viewer? We're in the boat with him. So this idea of this closeness, which you saw in the family paintings, but not opening up and embracing us as the viewer. And that brought up lots of questions because Caillebotte's younger. He's 9 years younger than most of the Impressionists. And we don't have any information of whether they actually liked him. Did they let him into their circle because he was paying for their works and helping them with their exhibitions? And he had a lot of money? We don't know. I mean, with Renoir, with Monet, with Manet, you get a sense there's a kind of a give and take, that they know each other familially, that they're personally interested in each other, that they're helping each other, they have each other's backs, that they're also exchanging art ideas. This is Pissarro. You barely see him over there. He's always the oldest one in the group. But these are writers about art. These are journalists. These are intellectuals meeting together. They're all art related. Caillebotte's friends weren't necessarily art related. They weren't, in fact, he had a couple of artist friends, but they weren't part of the Impressionist circle. He had engineer friends. He had a baker friend. He had friends who did absolutely nothing because they didn't have to. But there isn't ever a painting of Caillebotte by an Impressionist, nor did he ever paint his Impressionist colleagues. So really, what was going on? We have correspondence of him organizing, calling to dinner at his parents' house so they can figure out who's exhibiting what, how they're going to do it, but we don't know anything else. We have the business of the exhibitions, but we don't have the social aspect. And then, you think about paintings like this, the Manet. Manet was Caillebotte's idol, we know that, Manet and Courbet, because Caillebotte is a realist. It's that detachment, it's the realist program that he adheres to. He aligns himself with the Impressionists at the end of his life. When he's not exhibiting anymore, he allows himself that kind of freedom to paint alla prima very, very quickly. But he is never going to be in their camp in the same way. And I just wanted to show you this one because this one was actually painted in 1874, but he doesn't show it till 1879. And that's the same year that Caillebotte shows this painting along with the other boating paintings. And I can't say one led to one or who's looking at whom, but I think it's really interesting how different they are, because Manet is really showing the rower, and he's got the female companion, but it's the same compositionally. It's quite similar because we are being asked to be viewed in that boat. But on the other hand, having just a lone male rower is quite unique. And then, of course, when you go on the other side of the wall and you see the rowers with their white jerseys and their jeans and the musculature and the anonymity, as opposed to the rower whose name we wished we had. He's just so handsome, I love it. But you just get another sense, and the water is completely different. This is what drives me nuts. So look at the water here. Did Monet come in? Oh. And then look at it here. It's a powerful painting. The figures are amazing, but the water is completely different. It's not as convincing, it's not as observed as the man on the left, the rower. And you'll see this when you go into that area where you're kind of immersed in these Yare River painting of these rowers. And then there's so many odd things that happen in Caillebotte. The more you look, the more you're aware, not only of the anonymity and that he's just refusing to let us have any sense of who they are, but, the pipe that you just see, and all of a sudden you realize this guy's smoking and he's got a straw hat really close to the pipe, and isn't that going to catch on fire, and that's going to make everything wrong? Or this guy, is he just holding himself up by pushing against that little, how is he seated? He looks like he's in the air. And then you realize there's just this little tiny piece that's slightly different colored that's telling you that he's perched on this little slab across. But it's hard to see. And when I kept thinking, how is he holding himself up? This painting becomes very, very strange. And it's a small boat. It's the two-seater of the kayaki skiffs that you see in the one-seaters, but yet he's got a giant oar. He's got an oar as if he is in a substantial boat. So many things that don't make sense. And on the other hand, it's so carefully observed, and that boat is so beautifully described. And then you get to these, and you're like, what happened? You had that beautiful musculature, you had the anatomy, and now you have these, these faceless Gumby people, and he doesn't have a boat. He doesn't have a boat, he's just floating, he's just on the water, and all of a sudden you get these little T-Rex arms and little teeny hands, big feet. It's so incredible, and it's like, what happened? Did he not get them to pose because they're in motion like he could for the other paintings we just saw, where he could say, stop, I want to catch that, and so he just winged it? Is he doing it on purpose? His inconsistency, his awkwardness fascinates me, that he could go from, I can show you that too. I'm sorry, I'm going back here. That he could go from this to this, and the water too, the water is just not as convincing. Yes, it's more looser and impressionist than what he was doing earlier, but it's still very odd. And it gets odder. Look at him. He's just a stroke of color. There's nothing else going on there. And look how he's crammed in there, and he in his little hand. Anyway, the paintings still work, and when you see them all together, but the inconsistency is what fascinates me. It's just like, wow, this is an artist who is learning on the job and is capable of doing something that we think Monet could have done that water. And then you see something like this. And, at the end of his life, he again gets into the water reflections, and he tries to, in a certain way, he's channeling Monet now that he is no longer exhibiting with his colleagues. He's going back almost 20 years and doing a Monet, but it's still very different than what Monet would have done. And I just have this kind of, I'm indulging myself with this, where you can just see just how different he paints water, and at the end of his life, he's just slabbing it on, But he's interested in these patterns of water, and sometimes they're convincing, and sometimes they just aren't. And then these paintings, what do we make of these paintings? We know they were decorative. They were made to be seen in that house at Yare. They would have been fitted into the woodwork, but they're so different. It's kind of like he asked Renoir to come over and say, what do I need to do? These are decorative. They need to be, seen like wallpaper on the wall. And that's what he's done. And they're extremely interesting, but so different. If you go to the same little, T-Rex arm men of the earlier ones, done at the same time. He's doing these big decorative paintings that are going to be seen and just lived with. They're not supposed to be seen as you see easel painting. They're supposed to be not like wallpaper, but like mural painting as you're eating, for example, or in a public room where you would have people, and so that's the water sports of fishing, swimming, and boating. They're incredibly different in texture and the impasto and the reflections, and of course they show a completely different type of people. This is his niece, his cousin, and then what do? I couldn't get this one for the exhibition because he wouldn't lend. But how interesting. So what does that mean? So they did wear bathing suits. They didn't wear just jersey outfits. There were people wearing, smaller fitting. And what does that mean? Who are these guys as opposed to these guys? Did he have to put them in more appropriate, more cover-ups for the decoration that's going to be seen on a big scale, and he could do this privately? Don't know. And we can't know because we didn't get that lent to us. Then there's the question of how he is presenting himself. So in the Rabatteur, which he first tries to show at the Salon, which is refused, and then he shows it the next year with the Impressionists, you've seen that signature. The signature is 5 inches tall. It really, I'm presenting myself, and he thought he was going to be seen in the Salon and he'd be skied, and so it was important that you see his name from a distance. But his signatures are fascinating, where he puts them, how he writes them. Sometimes it's wet on wet, Sometimes it's over on he's let the painting dry and he's signed it. And sometimes it's not his signature, it is the stamp of the family. So this is the stamp for the Caillebotte family, and I met the owner of the stamp, and he's like, I have the stamp. Like, wow, that is power. That is a stamp, for example. This is an unfinished painting. He never exhibited, left in the family, goes to Martial, and then Martial's wife, and now the 5th generation of the Caillebottes. And this is interesting because the family, and we noticed this when we were checking the paintings in, and we were really close by. You can barely see it, but this is a signature and a date, 1880, that he painted. But the family obviously didn't see it, and so they stamped it. So it's stamped and signed because they have to stamp everything to say this is a real Caillebotte. Then we get to our painting, and our painting continues to, it's like the Grand Jatte for me. I never can get enough of it. There's just such a magical distortion and a magical rightness about it. But we know he worked from many different sketches, painted sketches, pencil sketches for the cobblestones, for the couples, and we know he left her and all the figures in reserve when he finally scaled it up to the size it is now, the 7-foot wide size. But what's so interesting is that we also know that this guy was added on at the last part of painting it. So he painted the building, and then he decided the man needed to be there. And that, it changes everything. If you take him out of the equation, the immediacy, the directness, the quirkiness, the craziness of he is really, this guy is sort of in our space, but he's in front of her. So he is actually the first person we're going to run into as he almost runs into her as they have to negotiate how they're going to pass on this very narrow sidewalk. It's a wonderful painting because of that immediacy. And it's almost like the man in the canoe because that's what sucks you in. We are walking into the painting with him, like that dog that we become the dog. Well, not really, but we are led into the painting by his tail. And then these wonderful drawings, and I had never noticed this before. I was always fascinated by how how people hold umbrellas, how they walk down the street. But in one of them, he's actually shown the man underneath, so he's drawn the man, and then he's doing the umbrella over him, and it's just fun that you can see he doesn't try to shade out the man's head, he just allows it to exist underneath as if it's one of those transparent, clear umbrellas that we like to have nowadays. And then there's his friends. As I said, he doesn't have an artistic circle. He's with the Impressionists, he's very involved with their exhibitions until he's not, 1882, and then he lives until 1894. But his friends are always there. In these paintings, you get to know them. There's Richard Gallo, who's always the shortest one in the group, but they're not artists. They are not even collectors. Some of them end up with Caillebotte's work, but that's because Caillebotte gives them his work. And there you see them, the same people. The only time he shows his brother in any painting, no portraits, nothing, is in the Game of Bezique, where he shows Martial wearing the brown jacket. It's friends, but friends that are not necessarily in the art world. And this guy fascinates me. So there he is, he's got this larger-than-life portrait, which never goes to the family because he keeps it, and it ends up in Houston. And there he is, very similar to the way he looks in the photo. And Caillebotte shows him he's not asleep. I thought he was asleep, but he's kind of looking out, but he's bored out of his mind. And this is the man. He's a bachelor at this time. They're all bachelors in the Game of Bezique, but he goes on to marry, and Caillebotte paints his his baby 2 or 3 years later, on that same sofa that plays such a role in this exhibition. And I just love this, this little boy with this floral dress, with this floral sofa. I'm showing you a detail from the nude on the sofa. So again, who are these people? And then hands. I became fixated on hands in my last go-round with these artists, thinking about these hands, that he's really good when hands are doing something, and except for the T-Rex hands, but he's not as good when they're just there, but these hands are doing something. They're playing. It's all concentrated on this game where he has the meld on the hearts and all of these cards of this crazy game. And then he shows his friend Richard Gallo with hands that kind of imitate the lion claw of the chairs, and I love that. They're just these little paws. And then Richard Gallo, you can't get enough of him in this exhibition. He's everywhere. He's his bud. He was born in Alexandria, Egypt. Caillebotte tends to have people around him that have more exotic origins. His world is really small, but he has an artist friend from New Orleans. He has this guy born in Alexandria. He has another guy that we didn't get in our exhibition who was from South America. So it's almost like he has interesting friends who allow him a more worldview, but his own worldview tends to be about 5 blocks long. And then these just wonderful ways he shows his signature in the fringe and his just passion for patterns. Here's another one of those hands that I think could have been better if they had been doing something instead of just interlaced. But somehow it fits. If you look at the way the light is hitting his nose and it comes down and hits his hand, somehow he's got this big nose, he's got these big long fingers, and somehow it all works for this powerful friend of his who becomes one of his great yachting buddies. I wish we could have gotten this other portrait of Jules Froyer, because I think this is so beautiful. But look at his mustache, down, up. I don't even know. It's just like, huh? Is it the smiley face versus, anyway, emoji mustache, and then these long, elegant fingers. It's just like, really in our space. It's such a fascinating, because here he's so indicating the background. He's making sure everything is spelled out. And then in the sketch, it's just there, we fill it in. And then, of course, there's this one, which is the weirdest, and even the critics at the time, when there's so much, what is the same, for these who are not on the same scale, divorce is inevitable. But what's so fun about this is that he's really small, and he's 5 foot. In life, he's 5 foot. He's 1.55 meters. He's 5 foot. But there's a chair in between, that red chair you see again and again. So he's just done this weird thing with space, and he knows exactly what he's doing. He's doing that on purpose because he knows how to do perspective. And so it's just fun. He's playing with us, and he's playing with the French public who saw this painting in 1880 and saw it as a prelim to a separation. Because this is the way women were supposed to read. They're not supposed to read newspapers. They're not supposed to read heavy duty. They're supposed to read fashion magazines with illustrations of what to buy, what to wear, where to buy it. And the idea of having a man in the background on a sofa laying down reading a novel, just not done. And then what do you make of these? We couldn't get these two. I would have liked to have had these two in the exhibition, but we were really focusing on his males. But of course he painted women. And the one in the middle, Madame H, could it be Madame Hagen? Could this be his girlfriend to be? I don't know. And then this other woman on the sofa, we just don't know who they are. We have no idea who they're related to. And then we have this early pastel that's supposedly by Caillebotte. How could he do that and that? How could that happen? So the early pastel must have been done in another studio. It was probably a model he had from his classes with Léon Bonnat. But it's just so beautifully the anatomy is perfect. It's attractive. And then he goes from that to this painting supposedly of Charlotte, his companion. Different. Did he see Gauguin's portrait of the maid, Suzanne? She was the house girl that he shows in the 1881 Impressionist exhibition of Suzanne sewing, which is this very raw, naked woman who has the same kind of just folds, and this woman has her waistband showing on her skin, just really palpably realistic and vulnerable and makes you uncomfortable. Don't know. And then when he gets to the male nude, he is so a master. He knows what he's doing. His only counterpart would be Frederick Bazille, who dies in the Franco-Prussian War, who does this amazing men bathing together, but not in the intimacy of their bathtub. And this one, it's just this idea of male vulnerability. I had to show a Hockney because I just think he's so singular, and you don't see that until you get into the 20th century. And then what do we make of these Père Magloire, the gardener? So he's at Étretat, where he sailed along up there. Étretat is a very she resort area full of wealthy people who have summer homes, and he's showing the gardener 3 times. What was his relationship with this gardener? Don't know. And when he does move permanently to Petit Gennevilliers and becomes so absorbed in the yachting club and the yachting passion sport, who is this woman? Could this possibly be his significant other? Don't know. But we do know that Renoir paints her. Renoir paints his Charlotte, and he gives her a beautiful tint in that dog, and he makes the dog look normal. And then Caillebotte paints Madame Renoir, and he makes her look horrible. Madame Renoir is in the boating of the... This is Madame Renoir. She's not married to him yet. They live, they have an 8-year-old son by the time they get married, but they're certainly together. And this is supposedly Caillebotte, but he's grinning. How can that be? But it's on, I thought it was just a fantasy, but it's actually on the back of the photograph that Durand Ruel, the dealer who sold this, has, and he indicates who's who in this photograph. So there's no reason to say no, it's just Renoir embellishing his friend as usual. And that dog looks normal. But look at this. So Caillebotte paints a dog, and he calls it Charlotte. Is that dog? It is so weird. It is the weirdest dog, and it shows up again in this portrait. And I know I have to hurry up. So when he moves, this portrait shows the sons of this man, right here, Lamy on the right. And this shows Lamy's sons, who were illegitimate at this time. They 11 and 13-year-old, and he paints them in this. And there he is talking to Lamy. He paints him in this decorative painting that was intended to go in his brother's house on the occasion of the birth of their second child. And this is his brother's home where he was not allowed to go with Charlotte. So you see, because there's the priest, not going to happen. But maybe that arched painting was meant to be something like that. We don't know. We don't know if it was ever installed. We just don't know. But the idea of a painting of illegitimate children going into his brother's home where his wife won't allow him because he's living in sin strikes me as really fun. And then finally, what about this, their stamp collecting? They had the largest collection of Mexican stamps. What? And when they give it to, and their stamp collection ends up being in the British Museum, and these brothers are extolled for their stamp collecting, and it's just really important. But why? Why Mexico? Well, there was, Mexico and France, they had their moment in history, but it's just really interesting. We just don't know. So much about this artist remains singular, but it makes me like him better. When I go up to the 201 in our Impressionist collection, and I think about how different and how bold and how he's not really a product of his time. He is a product of himself. He is Caillebotte. And so I just want to end very quickly with where Caillebotte's world is today. As I've said in many of these lectures, you can still go to Hyères and see the home. They have a stamp with Hyères, and that's perfect. They were stamp collectors. You can see the billiard room reconstructed. You can see the gardens, and there happened to be a volunteer who's probably not happy I took this picture of him, but we didn't get the painting on the left, but you can see these very long, like those streets, like these rows that he's so fascinated with, these patterns. You can see me at a window looking out. I took this photo when I was walking down the street because it was like, okay, there's a Caillebotte. He's looking at these tracks, the detail. He's looking down at these silver tracks. And he's looking down from the fourth floor, as I was doing when I got up to the balcony of the brothers' home. And I took these photos because those little birdie things are actually stone. They're out of the metal that the balcony is. The balcony itself still exists just as it was. Roast beef, his favorite boat, is now reconstructed, and you can go on it at Argenteuil. And there we are at the famous Paris Street Rainy Day. So I want to end just by saying that, I love this quote. When we start with a tale, enough twisting may leave us without one. He gets you into it, he lures you into it, and then suddenly, what is going on? And my joy in life would be to be the Penguin Classics chooser of the books, and I would choose this from Maupassant instead of the Bonnard, which is chronological, and I would definitely choose this for Madame Bovary. And here's our painting in the Gilded Age. So he is becoming a household name, and we hope this exhibition has helped him get there. Thank you. So we have some time for questions. Please raise your hand, and the staff will bring a microphone to you.
Thank you very much for an outstanding presentation. Is it true that his Caillebotte descendants came to Chicago recently for the opening of the exhibition?
Some of them did. We had 16 of the family, and it was wonderful that they were able to make it. They did not go to the Getty because of the fires and stuff, and so they came here. We had thought they would divide up, but they all came here, and they had a wonderful time. They stayed for about 4 or 5 days, different parts of the family, not all. As I said, they're in 5th generation, so there were a lot of different ages, and yeah.
Right over here.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for your talks. Every time I hear you, it's just a gift. So thank you for sharing your talents with Chicago and the art world in general. I did have some questions. Did he work from photographs at all? And also, I was interested in his perspectives where he seems to be high. Was he working on a ladder, or, how was he able to, so accurately kind of portray these perspectives?
I think that he went to a very expensive boys' school, and they did take architecture and painting. I think that was taught in the Lycée Henri IV, which was one of the best. So, and at the end of his life, as you know, he designed 20 different boats. He was a naval architect practically by the end of his life. So I think a lot of that comes from his earliest training, and then training with one of the very well-known artists at the time, very realist artist par excellence, certainly for men. And I also think he was aware of photography, but until his brother gets a camera in 1890, there were no photographs. There nothing that indicates he had photographs for the streets. We think our painting was the result of a camera lucida. which is that prism that you look into, and it kind of gives you the outline of at least the perspective. So he might have used that for others. We have no evidence. Yes.
Right back here.
Oh, I don't know who. I'm just going to follow Francis now. Okay.
Well, thank you again for your talk. It was really interesting. I was wondering if it was a couple of things. If it was a conscious choice you made not to do much analysis of his compositions, because he seems to be obsessed with, to me, with the counterpoint between rectilinear lines, which are usually associated with immaterial objects, buildings, hard, inert objects, and curvilinear lines, which are generally associated with human bodies, with sails blowing in the wind, with the shape of the canoe structure. And I just wondered, if that was a conscious choice on your part not to talk about composition. And then also my other question was, which is a more trivial one, was it a conscious choice to paint the walls lavender in the gallery where most of the paintings of the male nudes are?
So to your first question, that's another lecture. We could do a diagram of each of these paintings, but that would be a different lecture. And I have a lot more. I could go on for hours. I was just trying to give an idea of what we know and what we don't know. And for the second one, it's not lavender. It is actually blackberry Benjamin Moore, matte. Paris did it on lavender, and we thought that prettified them and kind of played into the sofa and made them we wanted something bold as those paintings are.
Gloria, I have a question in the center over here.
Gloria, you're terrific. What is his relationship with Seurat?
None whatsoever. Signac, who is a neo-impressionist and who is very close to Seurat, he taught him some boating, and they ended up being boating companions. They knew each other. Towards the end of his life, Signac was at Argenteuil, part of the Paris Boat Club. But there is nothing that we would love to say that Seurat saw the Caillebotte painting and then he did his response on the island of La Grangeade of these people hanging out. But there is no proof that they ever intersected. Seurat's he's the next generation.
We have time for one more question. There's one way in the front.
I'm not sure where she's going. It's like a game.
Hello, thank you for your lecture. That was amazing. I noticed, I love the T-Rex arms.
You did what? I'm sorry?
I love the T-Rex arms.
Oh.
Especially, but...
now everybody's going to only think that when they see those paintings. So
it's
sorry, but
it's what I thought too, and I noticed that there seemed to be a point where it changed, and I was wondering if there was a time when he stopped doing sketches and studies, and that's when his anatomy kind of declined and became less accurate.
He was doing sketches at that time. Those were just a year after. Those were the same time almost that he's doing all the sketches. Again, I think maybe things in motion were different than things that you compose, but I don't know. He did get, he goes back and forth. There's some beautiful, The Man at His Bath is one of his last paintings that he does, before he just does a lot of boating and gardening paintings. It's the last really strong figure painting. It's amazing, the anatomy, but the woman on the couch it's uncomfortable. I find myself looking at the couch, this divan, and like, oh, I love the divan, and trying to avoid something very discomforting about that. And I think that probably he had painted more men, he had studied men in modeling classes, and he was just more familiar with the male anatomy than the female anatomy. But I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. It's my last time up here.